If we grant Filipino citizenship to Mr. Brownlee, is he willing to stay here in our country after his playing days?
My understanding, Mr. President, is that he is not just willing, or his willingness can be shown by the answer given to my query, which, Mr. President, with the permission of the good gentleman from the playing coach from San Juan, I would like to play it again. It has something to do with his willingness to serve in the armed forces of the Philippines. If you are willing, Mr. President,
Yes.
I can show this just for 1 minute. Can you play it, technical team? Palabas po natin ulit. Can we have a sound for this?
Nakakasilaw.
Can we have an audio here? Apparently, we're having a technical difficulty.
Anyway, in order to save time, can I proceed with my second question?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. President.
But the answer for the record, again, with the permission of the playing coach from San Juan,
May I know how old is Mr. Brownlee?
he is now 34.
34. And he's willing to serve under the Philippine Army?
Yes, Your Honor. Kung hindi ba natin maipalabas ito? Hindi natin ma-play? Technical? Mamaya na lang. So, ang tanong ko po dito, handa po ba kayong, kung lahat ng Pilipino kasi, in English, sabi ko, lahat ng Pilipino sa ayon sa Ligang Batas ay dapat, kung patatawag, magsilbi bilang miyembro ng Sandatahang Lakas o magsilbi during calamities. Ang sagot po niya, opo, sir. So, payag po siya.
So, Filipino?
Nakakaintindi po siya pero hindi po fluent.
Kabisado na ba niya ang lupang hinirang?
I have a feeling na may mga kanta rin siyang alam in our dialect.
Because if my memory serves me right, when Andre Blatche, no, applied for Filipino citizenship, I was quite hesitant because I knew that after his playing days here in the Philippines, after representing our country, he will not reside here, and that was the truth. I mean, he did not reside. He went back to the United States and resided there. So, what will happen to his Filipino citizenship, Mr. Chairman?
I understand that predicament, but I think, Mr. President, the reason for the apparent return back to the United States of those granted Filipino citizenship is the lack of opportunities here. The Philippine Basketball Association or even other local leagues will not allow them to play. The reason being is that they are way above the skills level of
Okay.
our local players. So ayaw nilang palaruin. Nagmamakaawa na po si Blatche at si Douthit. Ayaw
Hindi.
nilang palaruin.
Kasi siyempre may edad na si Blatche, may edad na si Douthit. So, natural lang siguro uuwi sila sa kanilang sariling bansa, hindi na dito. So ano nga ang magiging trabaho nila rito sa ating bansa?
Yun na
Kung
nga,
talagang matanda ka na, hindi na pwede maglaro.
yun na nga po, Mr.
And that's the
President.
only profession that they know, to play basketball.
Yun na nga po, Mr. President, na discriminate sila bilang mga Pilipino na makapaglaro. At Mr. President, aalis lang po ng mga magigiting nating mga kaibigan sa University of Santo Tomas. And another playing coach here is present in the person of Senator Joel Villanueva. Alam niyo po, Mr. President, siguro alam to ni Senator Villanueva, a former PBA player coming from the Alaska Aces. The name is Sean Chambers.
Sean.
Chambers.
Yeah, Sean.
Chambers. Oh. So, mali na ang pronunciation ko.
Naabutan ko po yun.
Sean Chambers.
Chambers.
Si Chambers po, si Ginoong Chambers, nung naghahanap ng coach ang University of Santo Tomas, indicated his intention to coach the UST Tigers. Hindi rin po napagbigyan. Ewan ko po kung ano nangyari. Pero willing po siya mag-settle na dito kahit hindi siya Pilipino. Iko-coach niya ang UST. Nag-champion ho sana ang
Hindi,
UST.
meron yata silang coaches. I think meron silang
Sean
Coaches
Chambers.
Association of the Philippines na
Ayaw siya palaro eh.
ilimit natin sa mga Filipino coaches, sa
Bakit
local
po
coaches.
si Tab Baldwin,
Well,
nagko-coach?
hindi, nauna na yun eh.
Tim Cone.
Tim Cone, si Norman Black, etc., etc. Anyway, Mr. President, in order to save time, my last question is, if we grant Filipino citizenship to Mr. Brownlee, is he considered as can he play in the All-Filipino Cup? Is he considered as a regular Filipino player or naturalized Filipino player?
Yun na nga po nakakalungkot, Mr.
Or is he going to be considered still as an import?
Yun po nakakalungkot. I asked that point blank to the PBA administrators. Parang ayaw nila. Compared, Mr. President, ito magugulat kayo. If I can allow the technical again to show my slide here. Slide na lang ito, wala nang sound. Yung pong mga players na naglalaro ngayon sa World Cup, sa FIFA, yung pinanonood natin ng madaling araw.
Yes.
Kung makikita nyo po yung slide, ito po, Mr. President, nakapost ngayon. There are almost 136 players playing in Qatar sa World Cup na naturalized. Ngayon ko lang nalaman, and they're being allowed to play as locals doon sa mga local leagues nila. Makikita nyo po, karamihan po galing Africa, naglalaro sa France, naglalaro sa Germany, even the Middle East. So, napakarami po niyan. Even the United States, meron silang 5 players.
Naturalized.
From other
Africa
countries.
also?
Nandito po yan.
From African countries.
Meron po sa, I think this one is Switzerland. Itong isa si Vickers. So, hindi po purong all-American team yung soccer. So, this is a revelation likewise to this representation na hindi lang pala sa basketball, pati sa FIFA. Kaya baka maisip natin balang araw kumuha na rin tayo ng ibang players para magkaroon tayo ng soccer team. Pero makikita po natin, this has been a trend. This has been happening worldwide. Several reasons. Baka humaba po to. Baka pag binasa ko to, ang haba na. Even Spain. Sa Spain po, yung Ghana, meron pong dalawa magkapatid, naglalaro sa Spain yung isa po naglalaro sa Ghana. So, makikita nyo po, this has been a trend. So, yung tanong nyo, baka anong ginagawa nila? Pinapayagan sila maglaro sa local league. Dito lang nakakapagtaka. This is very revealing, Mr. President, why we are not allowing, why we are discriminating against naturalized athletes coming from other countries. I don't know the real reason.
So do we consider him as a Phil-Am? No.
Phil-Am would refer to one with a
Kasi
blood
yung ating
lineage. He
Yes.
will be a true a Filipino naturalized. Wala siyang blood eh. So his mother is not a Filipina.
So have you consulted the PBA with regard to this matter, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
So
President.
they really will not allow him to play.
I gave them some options. So sabi ko, if a naturalized player reaches the age of 37 or 38, why don't you allow him to play so he can stay here, eventually become a coach? It is very discriminatory.
Okay, salary-wise, Mr. President, do you think it will not affect his salary as an import? I mean, he is still considered as an import. Am I correct?
Correct. Your
Hindi, ibig sabihin, hindi mababawasan yung kanyang sahod kung magiging Pilipino siya.
I
As a
don't
regular
think it will-
Filipino player. Kasi mas mababa ang mga natatanggap ng ating mga atletang Pilipino kaysa sa mga import. Tama po ba ako?
Yes, you're correct. But I think the salary cap is based on individual skills, Your Honor, not the citizenship.
Okay, going back to Andre Blatche, did he renounce his Filipino
No,
citizenship?
as far as
He
I'm
hasn't
concerned,
renounced it yet.
he's still a Filipino.
So,
And it's been
ano
one-
tawag sa kanya? Dual
Yes.
citizen.
Yes. But he uses his Filipino passport. But I understand, Your Honor, he's been more than willing to play here, even that in the PBA,
How
even
old is he? Baka hindi na makatakbo, mabagal na, mataba pa.
I think he's
Si
around
Blatche.
30. He's as old as LeBron James.
Huh?
LeBron James, Mr. President, LeBron James is 39.
39 na
LeBron
yun?
James is 39 and still
Si Blatche.
leading the pack. Blanche, I think, is 37 or 38. If I might be wrong, but hindi po nagkakalaro.
So Brownlee is only 20,
34.
34. So
5
he's willing to
years.
play for Gilas, of course.
Yes,
Once he obtains a Filipino citizenship.
by
Am I correct?
February, Your Honor.
By February. Okay.
And he indicated his willingness to play for two local teams,
San Juan
two
Knights?
LGU teams,
San Juan Knights?
San
Well,
Juan Knights and
if
Tagaytay
that is the
Warriors.
case, I will never object. Huh?
San Juan Knights.
San Juan Knights was hindi naman champion yung team nila. San Juan champion. So with that,
That
Mr.
can
President,
be, yes.
with
I know,
that,
I will
Mr.
not ask for
President, I
the
would like to conclude my
deletion of that.
interpellation. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you again to the playing coach from San Juan Knights.
Mr. President, next is the distinguished gentleman from the region of Bicol and our dear colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, is recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo at sa ating pinunong mayorya. Ako po naman ay wala naman ho akong kontra patungkol doon sa pagbibigay po ng citizenship dito sa ating African-American na nagngangalang Justin Donta Brownlee. Sapagkat sa usapin po ng basketball, talagang mahalaga po yung height. Pero ako po ay napatayo lamang sa aking kinauupuan, ating mahal na kasama sa partido ng PDP Laban, nung inyo pong nabanggit na pati po sa football. Apo, mahal kong kasama at pinsan, hindi po yata ako payag sa usapin na yun, sapagkat ang football po ay hindi laro ng pataasan ng height. At yan po mas marami po dyan na magagaling na kahit ng mga Pilipino. Alam ko pong medyo wala dun sa issue, pero pagdating po dun sa kukuha pa tayo ng foreigner sa football, ay hindi po ako papayag. Sapagkat maniniwala po ako at ako po ay talagang believe sa ating mga kababayan pagdating po sa kaparehas nating height, tayo po ang pinakamagaling. Pero sa usapin po dyan sa basketball, maihahambing ko po yan. No, alam niyo po ba, nung panahon ng revolusyon, laban natin sa mga Amerikano, meron tong isang African-American na tumulong sa mga katipunero na ang pangalan po si David Fagan.
Sa Pampanga po. Tayo.
Ano po yan? Tumulong po yan sa mga katipunero. Ano po yan? Bumaliktad mula sa pagiging American Forces, sumama sa mga Pilipino. Kaya payag po ako dyan sa basketball. Pero mahal na kasama sa PDP Laban, hindi po ako papayag sa football.
Mr. President, kaya ko lang po nabanggit yung sa football kasi po lahat po ngayon ay napupuyat while watching the World Cup. If you will recall, the European teams were surprised by the team of Morocco. Morocco is now part of the top 16. Pero I was surprised, Mr. President, when I researched, one half of the players of Morocco were born in other countries. Sila po ay sumali lang doon sa Morocco to play football, to play in the World Cup. Ganon din po yung Swiss striker na si Bril Embolo. He's not really from Switzerland, but from Cameroon. And to place this on the records, Mr. President, can I show my other slide? Sayang yung ni-research ko eh. Ito po, can we enlarge this? Can we enlarge this? So, if you will see this graph, Mr. President, nakikita nyo po, ibaba po nyo ng konti. Can you lower it down? Medyo malaki. Lower it down again. So, since 1920, it has been the trend that other countries are really sourcing their top athletes from other countries too. So, the top 10 includes Australia, Brazil, Canada, even China. Yung mga ping-pong players po ng ibang country galing sa China. Spain, France, Great Britain, Italy, Japan, and the United States. So all of them are sourcing athletes from other countries. So this has been the trend since 1920. And sa football po, I recall, Mr. President, that we just naturalized a football player in the name of Mr. Marañon, who is now playing for the Ascals. Yes.
Spanish po yata yun? Ano ba po yun? Spanish pa po yun?
Ito po, bago lang po ito, last Congress, I think, Mr. President. So, siguro po, tama po kayo, yung sa height, but then again, the trend has been that we can balance everything. I am not really for outright sourcing of other bloods, but if it will upgrade the skills development program of our Filipino athletes, why not, Mr. President?
Mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, inuulit ko po, ako po ay walang kontra dito sa basketballista na nais maging Pilipino. Isang karangalan po 'yon para sa atin, Nakakatuwa po 'yon at gusto pang mag-serve sa Philippine Army. Pero pagdating po talaga inuulit ko po sa football, wag naman po. Yun lamang po. Maraming salamat. Maraming salamat.
Thank you.
At lalo na po sa martial arts natin, Arnis, di tayo papayag na.
Opo, nako, lalo na to.
Imported.
Maraming
Thank you
salamat po.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Mr.
Maybe not
President.
just football, arnis, Mr. President, baseball, and all. I think that's why this August chamber is very keen in scrutinizing this particular measure, Mr. President, because we don't want to deny our locals
Yes.
of that opportunity to represent our country. It's a great pride on our end, Mr. President. Mr. President, last but not the least is the distinguished minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel is recognized.
Just a few questions, Mr. President, with the permission of our sponsor.
Yes, Mr. President, especially if the good gentleman from Cagayan de Oro will not ask me questions about naturalizing chess players coming from the Russian Republic.
That's a good idea, Mr. President. Pero that's for another time. Mr. President, I want to ask the sponsor so he can enlighten us. Under existing law, Mr. President, what are the requirements of the applicant for Philippine citizenship? Does he need to be, at the time of the grant of Philippine citizenship, does the applicant need to already know the national language aside from English, kasi official language, English is an official language, or does he or she need to be able to sing our national anthem under existing law, Mr. President?
Mr. President, that has never been part of the requirements, but I understand the requirements for judicial or even legislative or administrative naturalization would just have the same documentary requirements needed, Your Honor, plus the real intent coming from the heart to be a Filipino citizen.
Yes, Mr. President. I have seen the video because I think you showed that during the sponsorship
Yes, Your
period. And all that the applicant said was opo.
Opo.
Satisfied ka na po doon, Mr. President, doon sa opo? Doon sa,
Opo.
Yun na po yun.
Opo, Your Honor.
Okay po.
Mr. President, but I have talked to the guy.
Apo.
And it's not just me, but Senator Villanueva, I think Senator De La Rosa, and a lot of other members of this chamber. And I think his willingness can be shown by the fact that he really wants to stay here, not just because of basketball, but he already embraced the Filipino culture, way of life. So Yun po yung nakikita natin dito.
Yes, Mr. President. If a talented sportsman like Brownlee applies for Philippine citizenship, then we should, we should, I think, feel some pride, no, that a talented sportsman would want to assume our or to get our citizenship. But we are doing this actually, Mr. President, because we also expect him to play for the Philippine team in international basketball competition.
Correct, Your Honor. Correct, Mr. President. And that will be part of his service to this country. To bring pride to the number one sports we all love. That's basketball.
Ngayon, Mr. President, the grant of Philippine citizenship will make Mr. Brownlee a full Filipino citizen for all intents and purposes. So, to pursue the point raised by Senator Jingo Estrada, isn't there any anti-discrimination law existing now which is violated if he continues to be treated like a foreigner, an import, Mr. President?
I think the labor code of the Philippines is being violated. He should be given the opportunity to be employed as a Filipino basketball player.
Okay, so yes, so I agree, Mr. President, with the position of our sponsor kasi nga yung ang tatanungin ko nga sana si Blatche ang pagkaintindi ka natanong na ni Senator Jingo umalis na lang tuloy ng ating bansa kahit siguro gusto niya rito manatili rito. Basketball player siya. Yun po, he's a professional basketball player. Yun po yung skill set niya. And then pagdating dito, he's not treated like a Filipino, although he passed all the requirements and even the procedure. He went through the procedure of acquiring Filipino citizenship. So
Yes,
I
Your
hope that we treat Mr. Brownlee better than how we have treated Mr. Blatche.
If I may volunteer, Mr. President, Your Honor, I have here in my possession a special work permit coming from the Bureau of Immigration with Justin Brownlee as the applicant. So if he becomes a Filipino, there is no more need for a special work permit from the Bureau of
Dapat.
Immigration.
Yes,
Kasi
sir.
Filipino na siya.
Apo.
Di ba, magbabayad siya ng buwis dito, meron
I
siyang...
agree.
Pareho na po yun, may PhilHealth na dapat siya.
Apo.
So this should not apply anymore.
But after, hindi pa, yes,
After,
yes, yes. You want to say something? Yes, Majority
President,
Leader.
and with the indulgence of our minority leader and our distinguished colleague, I totally agree, Mr. President, about the labor code, about equal opportunity. But, the dilemma, Mr. President, is the fact that if we are to consider Mr. Justin Brownlee, if we are to consider Ange Kwame, for instance, as a Filipino citizen, considering that he underwent the process of being a Filipino citizen. The UAAP, for example, if you are with UP, LaSalle, UST, UE, Adamson, NU, will you allow two Ange Kwame to play for Ateneo? Now, if you are with Pure Foods, Phoenix, Converge, a team in the PBA, would you allow two Justin Brownlee to play for Ginebra San Miguel? So the point, Mr. President, that I just wanted to raise in this August chamber is the dilemma, Mr. President, of these teams competing in one league. And that's why I feel, Mr. President, that is indeed with the league committee to make that decision, Mr. President. Because if I am in the shoes of these general managers from different teams, why would I allow my team to compete with the other team having two, basically or technically, two imported players, Mr. President? So just for the discussion, Mr. President, but please don't get me wrong, I agree that under our labor code and under the equal opportunity clause of the Constitution, dapat ho talagang ituring na Pilipino si Justin Brownlee. And last but not the least, Mr. President, that I'd like to raise, because I have known Mr. Brownlee for quite a long time. I have watched him grow as an import here in the country. I remember when the very first time he played against the Alaska Aces, he wasn't in condition. In fact, he went here without his rubber shoes, Mr. President. He was called to come here from Las Vegas, and he flew right away. And during that time, he wasn't in condition, Mr. President. But then he played his heart out, and after some time, really worked hard to be part of Ginebra San Miguel. And when he became an import of Ginebra San Miguel, he would volunteer himself, Mr. President, in our Gilas team, in our national team, to train our boys because of his vast experience, considering that he played to so many teams outside the country in international competition. In fact, he played for Alab Pilipinas, Mr. President, and one of those guys who gave glory and pride to our country because during that time, they won the ASEAN Basketball Cup tournament, Mr. President. And so, I just wanted to put on record, I've known this guy for quite a long time, and if there's anyone na ipinasang citizenship law dito sa bansa na foreigner na naging Pilipino, Mr. President, para po sa akin, in my own personal capacity as a former basketball player, national team member, played for the Philippine team in 94 and in 95, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would say na ito ho, na tao na ito, yung pinaka-deserving, most deserving sa pagkakaalam ko to become a Filipino citizen. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo. Thank you, dear colleagues.
So, thank you, Mr. President. On the substance, wala naman yata tayong issue, but yun na lang, let's learn from the experience or the information that we got from the experience of Mr. Blatche. Let's give Mr. Brownlee, if this becomes law, our new member of the Filipino community, a better experience as far as, and he's younger, he's still young, so he has got a lot of productive years ahead of him, no? And he's a basketball player. Hindi naman siguro siya nagkukunwaring iba siya. So, he's a basketball player, so let's allow our newly welcomed fellow Filipino citizen a chance to also be gainfully employed as a basketball player.
So the proposal of Your Honor would be to craft an amendment to the labor code that naturalize Filipinos. Hindi na kailangan, ano?
Hindi na po. I agree with you. Wala na po yung requirement po, Mr. President, na
Special
pinakita po
permit.
ng ating sponsor na special permit. Wala na po yan. Ngayon, Mr. President, on the procedure lang po, no? Because I really promise you that our flow chart in the questioning of the minority would start with the procedure. This is a private bill because this is about citizenship, which should originate in the House, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President. So, did the committee act on this measure as a Senate bill, even if the House bill was not yet here in the Senate, Mr. President?
Mr. President, since it's a private bill and pursuant to the Constitution, we waited for the committee report. We waited for the third reading on the part of the lower house. But since in practice we have been doing this, like the General Appropriations Act, it's the same, Your Honor. So we had that hearing, but the committee report would have to await the third reading of the House. So again, Mr. President, this is pursuant to Section 24 of the Constitution. I don't, as Article 4, private bills shall originate exclusively from the House of Representatives. So the same thing happened, Mr. President. The legislative authorization emanated from the House of Representatives, although there is a Senate counterpart, there are Senate counterpart bills which are more or less the same, mirroring the contents of the House bill. So we waited for that, and the procedure was followed, Mr. President, under Article 6, Section 1 of the Constitution.
What are we hearing?
So, and I think, Mr. President, this was likewise the same process followed when Republic Act 11570 relative to Mr. Marañon, which I mentioned a while ago, Angie Kwame 11543, Andre Blanche 10636, Douthit, Republic Act 10148, the same procedures were applied. And the requirements submitted, I have here 21 requirements followed by Mr. Brownlee. And all of these items were submitted and considered by your committee, but we waited for the outcome of the proceedings in the House of Representatives, Your Honor.
Well, that's the, thank you for informing the body of the legislative history of this measure, Mr. President. So it's a fact that when the committee was hearing this measure, it was hearing the Senate bill because the House bill has not yet reached the Senate. And then the committee prepared the committee report, then awaited the arrival of the House bill before releasing the committee report.
But as I have said, Mr. President, the House bill is exactly the same version of the Senate bills. Almost, except for the authors, Mr. President. So it was in anticipation of what will be the outcome of the House bill. But to be more revealing, Mr. President, we are running against time here because there is a supposed to be February 6th window of the FIBA World Cup, and that's February. And there is supposed to be a deadline for the submission of lineups coming from all participants. So we're now approaching the Christmas season wherein there is going to be a break, and time pressed, we even inquired on the Department of Foreign Affairs, how long will the passporting process last? So this representation was informed that he will go through the same process as an ordinary Filipino. So the Christmas break, perhaps by almost the end of January, if the president signs a law or if it lapses into a non-signature law, it will take time. And by that time, Mr. President, we are now hosting the FIBA because it will be held in the Philippines, similar to Qatar. They hosted the World Cup in Qatar, and they have several naturalized players. So as the host country, I think the feeling of our kababayans and the members of the lower house is to really put up a stronger lineup rather than be beaten. The reason why we are in that qualified table is because we are the host. If we're not the host, we will not qualify. So that's the reason behind
Yes, sir. Yes,
all of this.
Yes, I get it, Mr. President. He will strengthen the Philippine team kasi ang height niya is not the normal height of a Filipino. So. But at any rate, Mr. President, just for the record, my understanding is a Senate bill which is exactly like a House bill in content, 100% duplication of or repetition of the House bill, is still not a House bill. Mr. President, it's still a Senate bill. But does the executive branch share the urgency being felt by the sponsor, Mr. President? Certified measure ba ito or ang PLLO ba ay nagsabi na they will interpose no objection, the bill will not be vetoed, Mr. President?
No, Mr. President. It is not a certified measure. It will go through the normal legislative mill, and going back again to the committee report which we reported out, we merely adopted the House bill, but we took into consideration the 3 Senate bills heard by the Committee on Justice. So I was informed again that if we do it like what we are doing here regularly, the earliest deadline for him to be issued a passport to qualify would be January 24, 2023. So considering the Christmas break, I think by 16 or 17, the FA will be closed, and the other holidays, this is still a challenge for him to hurdle. I was informed by Senator Villanueva that this is going to be photo finish because he's been applying since last year.
Sige po.
Kasi yung lockdown lang, hindi talaga niya ma-complete yung
Requirement.
mga requirements. So, ito medyo, the deadline is January 24, 2023, which is just several weeks from now, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, at any rate, sinabi ko nga kanina, there's no dispute or issue on the substance of the measure. Siguro the desire of Mr. Brownlee to be Filipino is independent from a specific basketball tournament. So we'll try our best to fast track this so that he can participate and represent our country in that tournament. But it does not end there. I mean, marami pa naman siguro tournaments where the Philippine team will send the Philippines will send a team to compete in international basketball competition, and hopefully, Mr. Brownlee will be part of those teams and then win victories for us, so that they will come back here to be honored, Mr. President. So,
Thank you, Mr. President. But I hope his working rights should be respected
yes,
likewise.
I join you. I join, Mr. President, our sponsor in that desire or expression of concern. So siguro, when he becomes a Filipino citizen, we have to still keep in touch with him, ask him, kumusta? Ano ba yung nararamdaman niya ngayon? Ano yung karanasan niya as a full Filipino citizen?
We will ensure
Yes.
that, Mr. President.
So, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the sponsor for his patience with that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. We
Thank you very
appreciate the
much.
questions.
And I hope this gentleman, Mr. Brownlee, will be a welcome addition to the Philippine team. I hope that he can play his heart and soul for our country, and that we go to greater heights with his participation. Majority Leader?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and I also would like to thank our distinguished sponsor, Senator Francis Tolentino, for also mentioning that this representation has been filing this bill for quite some time, Mr. President. But unfortunately, the House, I think 2-3 years ago, did not make it, Mr. President, and we did not act on it 2 years ago, together with Senator Sani Angara, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President, and with that, there being no member who wishes to interpellate or ask any more questions, I move that we close the period of interpellations, President.
There being no